Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America and the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. We encourage you to follow and to like us on Facebook. Very simple, facebook.com/ This Week in America. Facebook.com/ This Week in America. As mentioned, our guest on the program is Russ Zinser. He's an electronic engineer by training and artist by design, committed to a life of learning and growing. He's a musician, songwriter, performer, golfer, gardener, woodcarver, organizational consultant, and author of fiction. His book we're talking about today is a new science fiction and political thriller called In the Balance. He's joining us today. Russ, welcome to This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Looking forward to, there's so much that we're going to talk about during the course of the program. And I mentioned an engineer and an artist. Boy, you've got the analytical side, you've got the creative side, you've got a little bit of everything going for you there.
Yeah, I'm really happy. Both right and left brains.
I was going to say both sides of the brain are functional.
Yeah,
you know
that's
that.
right, exactly.
The book is In the Balance. I described it a new science fiction and political thriller. It's an excellent read. And if you say science fiction and people are thinking, I'm not really much into science fiction, this is much more than science fiction, isn't it?
Well, actually, the book started as more of my dissatisfaction with how the government is going, with how the folks in Washington are running the country, and it turns out that I kind of went sideways into science fiction. So the story is really not science fiction, although I'm using that as kind of the medium to tell the story.
What's interesting is the background on how all this came about. As I understand, you're a management consultant. You're out working with clients around the country. And you're suddenly realizing they're taking my word, sort of new eyes coming in and looking at the situation, and taking my plan in many cases over people within the building. And you're on a flight back one time, and you're thinking, boy, wouldn't it be nice if the government would do this rather than have it all like internal and they're just feeding off each other's ideas? Somebody qualified from the outside coming in and giving them input.
Right. Because and the way how that happened, it was on a flight home from one of my consulting gigs, and it occurred to me that if the government had somebody that had some actual data, actual information about what is about to occur to the U.S., the Earth, and all that would be something that they would pay attention to, and so that's how the story really developed. So in a flight from San Jose back down to San Diego, and that's about an hour and 20 minutes. I kind of scoped the whole thing out. And that's how it happened.
Let's talk about the two main characters in the book, one that's with us throughout the book. Steve and Diane Coulter. Explain in the beginning, and she has a sickness and ends up dying, and Steve goes forward. Talk a little bit about those characters.
Well, Steve is a guy that, and both Steve and Diane met as students at Stanford Medical School, and so Steve is kind of a guy that, he is well intended. He really wants to get the right things done. He has some trouble sometimes making that extra step, whereas Diane is very forceful. She really wants to get the right thing done. And so she is that impetus behind Steve throughout the whole book in moving ahead and doing the right thing.
Yeah, Steve went in the medical profession and suddenly decides I'm going to be a talk show host and becomes a real thorn in the side of the president and the government.
Yeah, after the death of Diane, he's really struggling with what he wants to really do in his life, and he finds that, in the medical profession is no longer doing it for him, and he's really realizing that the way that things are going in the world are really not benefiting the rest of the world. So he decides on a chance underground ride in New York. He meets somebody who is connected with the radio station, and then he eventually gets into being a talk show host, taking in calls about what's going on with the world.
And then you introduce inhabitants from a distant planet, Centaur. talk about them and how this evolves here, because this is actually fascinating. And then we'll talk about some of the observations that they were able to make about the
Well,
United
it's
States.
interesting about that because I'm waiting for somebody to say, "Wait a minute, this can't happen," because I think it really can. This is an advanced race. They've been flying around space for hundreds of thousands of
See, we
years.
all know somebody's watching us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so just out of curiosity, they are orbiting around Mars with this some kind of a scanning device scanning the Earth and that. And once they find out that Earth is able to land on the moon in 1969, they say, "Wait, we better start watching these folks and see how they progress and that kind of stuff." So they set up a plant on the far side of the moon, and they set up antenna and then start observing Earth. All of the different frequencies, TV, cell phone, radio, all that kind of stuff, to see what's going on. And that's how they set up that communication. And then when another planet that they observe has a problem, and they self-destruct, doing the same thing that Earth is doing, now they contact the U.S. and as well as China and Russia.
Yeah, and with the U.S., they're saying we're going to take three people, bring them, and we're going to share some of our input from our wisdom, what we've been able to see. One of the three happens to be Steve, who, as I say, is a real pain in the neck in terms of the president and the administration.
Right, because the Centaurians, that's the planet, the Centaurians, they they don't want to just bring on anybody, because they know the folks in the government and in heading up religions aren't going to do the right thing. They aren't going to make changes that are worthwhile for everybody. So they want to take some folks from the various countries, U.S., Russia, and China, who have demonstrated they truly want to get the right thing done, and that's who they select to come on to have the discussion with.
You're listening to This Week in America. Our guest on the program is Russ Zinser, Zinser. The book is called All Around the Country. You can find it at Amazon. Go to our website, and you'll be able to link on and get all the information on the book. Russ's website is russzinser.wordpress.com. Information there on the book. You can order the book there as well. Once they're talking with the Centurions, and you've got so many interesting discussions going on there. I just want to take two of these aspects, because they're things that many people look at and go, maybe this is a problem. Maybe this was great a couple hundred years ago. It's not working now. The one thing they point out is sort of the fallacy of the two-party system. You're either this or you're that. Talk a little bit about some of the wisdom they shared, which obviously are things that you believe in as well.
Well, part of the frustration is that you have these two different parties, and they're really not doing what's right for the people of the country, but rather trying to keep their own careers going. So their careers are more important than doing the right thing for the people. And so they put on a facade of arguing and debating, but what they eventually do is they come up with something that's a mediocre, this whole thing about compromise, as if compromise is a good thing. Compromise is not a good thing, because everybody gives up something. Whereas, let's work together, share ideas, and perhaps we can come up with something that's even better than what either of us thought before.
It's basically what listening is a key. Listen to what they're saying, because we're not, I say this individually, not always right, not always wrong. Occasionally, if we open our eyes and unplug our ears, we may find out and learn something.
Absolutely.
The book is called In the Balance, and you talk about the two-party system in the book. They're talking about the Centurions, and I'm acting like they're real people, but what they're saying really makes so much sense. The momentum of the past 50 years blinds your leaders to the reality that the system no longer serves the people. And the point you were just making is, in the beginning, it really worked well, because these people were professionals. They would come serve for a while, turn around and go back, and we would have that changeover. You're looking now at, it changed a little bit with the last couple of elections, congressional elections. Many of these people have literally been there for decades.
Yes.
And obviously somebody from the outside is saying, and that's the whole premise of the book, you've got outside eyes, independent eyes that are looking and pointing out things that maybe you could do differently if you did this, but we're so close to it, we accept it. Okay, once Steve and the others get this information, the real burden now is, okay, what do we do with it?
Yes. You know, I thought for a long time to expand the book and go into that. So Steve and the Russian and the Chinese lady, they they come back to Earth, and now they have to sort out what to do with all this. But you know, when it came right down to it, I thought it might be better just to leave it open. You know, it's up to us as Earthlings to figure out how to fix our world and where to go with that information. So Steve eventually has to make a choice between, do I go back and be the talk show host, or do I actually stop that and now help us make that change? And so that's the key thing. So and eventually he decides to do that. And so I mean that's what we're looking for. I mean I think a lot of people in the U.S. are looking for that someone that's out there that can provide the hope for the U.S. and the world, that we can change this around instead of putting up with what we have going right now in the government.
In the Balance is Russ Zinser's new book. Zinser is Zinser. His website is russzinser.wordpress.com. You go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on and get that information. The book's available at Amazon, where it's getting excellent reviews. One says, great read and waiting for your next one. Are you working on something else now?
Well, it turns out I already have a book completed. I completed it prior to In the Balance, and it's called The Longest Drive. And so I'm thinking about actually publishing that. I published that for family and friends, but now I'm thinking about actually putting it out there, and on Amazon and all those other ones. So yeah.
How difficult was it taking that idea you had that, okay, I see these things that, at least to me on the outside, look like they're problems in Washington. Nobody in Washington is really going to address these, because basically to address them means they're putting themselves out of work. So now you have to tell the story. I mean, you could do an editorial op-ed thing in the New York Times and put your piece in there.
Right.
People won't pay a lot of attention to it because it's probably just dry reading and things we've heard before. You're putting them in the story, and the story is compelling. The message is compelling, but the story is also compelling. How difficult was it to get, okay, I'm going to have these extraterrestrials, and they're going to be watching us, and they're going to share their wisdom with us?
Well, it turns out I have an engineering background, so I have some sort of a touch on technical things, and so I threw that in there because I wanted to make it believable. I wanted it to be where when somebody reads this, they can actually feel it happening. That's why I wrote the book in the present tense, as if it were happening right now. Instead of saying, Jack walked over there, it's Jack is walking. Jack walks over there. It's actually happening. So, but what I did is I just kept on taking notes and throwing them into a folder, and then when it came down to writing, just took all those notes out and made it into a scheme. So yeah.
How difficult was it to maintain that balance? That, okay, I want people to stop occasionally as they're reading and think about what it is I'm talking about, what it is I'm writing about, while at the same time I want them to keep reading. So I get reviews like, great read, I can't wait for his next book.
Right. I will be honest. I didn't consciously think to make that balance. But I did want to make it so that, in the very beginning, I talk a lot about both Steve and Diane, and I wanted to make it so that people actually can now almost see them in their heads. And once I have that, now go to the rest of the story where Steve is going to meet with the Centaurians and on from there.
It's interesting. I'm visualizing this as I'm reading too. Is this something you can take to the next level of a movie, a TV show?
Well, I'm working with another company, and where we would pitch this to both TV and movie folks.
Well, it certainly has merit. The book is called In the Balance. Russ Zinser, our guest on the program. A couple minutes left in the show. So often you talk to people, authors, that once they get over that, and I'll ask you how difficult that was, the discipline. Okay, I've got this idea. Now I actually have to put it on paper or put it into the computer, that type of thing. How difficult? Do you set a timeline for yourself that, okay, each day I'm going to do something, or each week I want to advance the story?
Well, I really didn't. A lot of the book was written on an airplane. As a consultant, I did a lot of flying. And so I did some of that on airplanes, which is really a great place to write because you're kind of, cut off from your
Yeah.
cell phone.
What
and
else are you
everything
going
else.
to do? Yes.
Yeah, right. So, so that really worked out well. But what I found is by, doing some passages, just do some writing. And when I wasn't sure where I wanted it to go, I just left it and went to a different part of the book, and it all kinds of came together.
It's fascinating. The book is an excellent one. Unfortunately, out of time on the program, we'll have Russ back and talk about his latest book, and we'll talk about hopefully making this into a movie at some point. The book is called In the Balance. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all across the country. His website, Russ Zinser, ZINSCR.wordpress.com. And, of course, you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link up with Russ's website. Russ, an excellent job. It's a great story. It moves really quickly, and you're reading a couple paragraphs, and you're stopping and going, wait a minute. These centurions know what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
You made a wise group of people. We need three parties in the U.S. We need Republicans, Democrats, and centurions to get us going in the right direction. Thank you so much for being with us on the program today. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to This Week in America and the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.